Hello everyone, and welcome to the new episode of Coming Soon Movie News with Nicholson. I'm your host, and on this episode we're going to be discussing X-Men Days of Future Past and Fox's new cinematic universe in general. So I'm going to get a little bit more into that near the end of the episode, but for now, let's kind of give you the basics of what we know so far about the film. It is the earliest film out of all the films that I've been talking about. It will be coming out near the end of May of this year, so we only have a few more months, and most likely are going to be getting a new trailer, I would assume probably within the next few weeks, but a lot of the stuff that I'm talking about today is going to be based off of the trailer, a lot of information that's already been released, and website Collider actually just had a set visit report that came out, which talked about over 100 different things that they learned while they were there, including discussions with Bryan Singer, the director, stars like Hugh Jackman, James McAvoy, and Nicholas Hoult. So I'm going to be discussing some of those things as well, but let me kind of give you a background on what the project is. So X-Men Days of Future Past is obviously the next X-Men film. It is a really ambitious project because what it's doing is it's actually combining the casts from the original trilogy. So you have Patrick Stewart, Ian McKellen, Halle Berry, Shawn Ashmore as Iceman, Ellen Page as Kitty Pryde, and Hugh Jackman as Wolverine, combining with the First Class cast, which was the James McAvoy as a younger Professor X, Michael Fassbender playing a younger version of Magneto, Jennifer Lawrence playing a younger version of Mystique, Nicholas Hoult playing the younger version of Beast. And basically the storyline is there is a massive war going on in the future. It's actually gotten so bad that both Magneto and Professor X have actually teamed up. Both of their sides have now kind of reconciled their differences, or at least put it on hold, because of the Sentinels. Now, the Sentinels were basically robots who were created by a man named Bolivar Trask, and he created them back in the 1970s. And for the sole purpose of eliminating mutants. So what's actually happened is we're going to see two different versions of the Sentinels in the movie. We're going to see the Sentinels as they were created back in the 1970s, and we're going to see the Sentinels in the future. Now, the basic storyline in the comics was Kitty Pryde, who is Ellen Page's character, was actually sent back to deal with everything in the past. It made more logistical sense for the screenwriters and for the audience for it to be Wolverine, because he's got the ability to heal. He doesn't necessarily age the same way that most people do, so it's a lot easier for them to have him in the past as well in the future and not have to do a lot of makeup to change his overall look. So it made more sense to do that change, but outside of that, they've stated that they have stayed relatively close to the source material. So it'll be interesting to see once we get a little bit more footage. But one of the most exciting things was at the end of the trailer. I will like it on my YouTube page so that you guys can check it out if you want to, if you haven't already seen it. But the last shot is Patrick Stewart's Professor Xavier face-to-face with James McAvoy's Professor Xavier, and they're having a conversation. So the fact that both of these two versions of the same character are actually going to be meeting that's awesome. I'm super psyched to see what they are able to do with this. From what we've been told, it's just going to be a short scene. I think it was James McAvoy's first day of filming, and it was Patrick Stewart's last day. So they only shot one scene. It's probably not going to be very long, but it's just seeing those two universes connected. It's pretty cool. Let's just put it that way. It's pretty cool. So essentially, yeah, Wolverine is sent back in time by Professor Xavier to stop Bolivar Trask from either creating the Sentinels or to stop him from continuing on and getting the Sentinels to the point that they're at in the future. Because I believe the timelines are separated by about 50 to 60 years. I think it's in the 2020s or possibly 2030 when they're in the future. And obviously when they go back to the past, they go back to the 1970s. So it's going to be set about 10 years after the events of X-Men First Class. So the characters have evolved a little bit. One of the biggest things that people have noticed in a lot of the images that have been released, in I believe one shot in the trailer, James McAvoy's version of Professor Xavier is actually walking around. And now that a lot of people said, well, that doesn't make a lot of sense. At the end of First Class, Magneto deflected a bullet, and it ended up going into his spinal cord, Xavier's spinal cord, which caused him to go into his wheelchair. Now, one thing that we find out in this movie, due to continuity errors that they had in the past movies, that Professor Xavier actually does retain the ability to walk. However, he makes a choice to use the chair. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out, whether or not it's a mental toll that it takes on him, if it's just a physical toll. We don't know. We just know that they've said there's a cost with this. So we really don't know too much more about it. Again, that's probably not going to be alleviated more on until we actually see the film. So probably going to have to wait until then. One of the more interesting aspects of this new story is the introduction of at least 6 new mutants that we've never seen before, along with all of the other returning characters. So the ones that are being introduced are, and these are the ones in the future. So these, I believe, are part of Magneto's mutant underground, and they are Blink, Bishop, Sunspot, and Warpath. I don't know a lot about most of these characters. Bishop is the one that I know the most about, and judging from what I've seen, they've pretty much nailed him. Don't think they're all going to have a lot of screen time. They're just kind of, it's like if you watch X3, or sorry, X-Men 3, there's one sequence where Magneto is giving a speech to a whole room full of people, and a lot of the mutants in that, they were only on screen for 1, maybe 2 shots, and that was it. A lot of them didn't even have dialogue. So these are more than likely just going to be pop your head in, say hi, and then leave. And then in the past, they have a new version of Toad, who looks terrible, and Quicksilver, who looks even worse. Not kidding. Look them up online, check out what they look like. Quicksilver looks like he jumped right out of Super Mario Brothers. He even looks like he has part of an old NES controller on his hip. It's a little ridiculous. Like he's called Quicksilver. Everything that he has is silver. His jacket, his hair, everything that he's wearing, any little thing that he's got on top of him, it's all silver. And that's just too on the nose. That's too hokey, and I don't think that that's going to look right. And on top of that, Quicksilver is also going to be one of the new Avengers in Avengers Age of Ultron. And we haven't even seen what they look like, but it's Joss Whedon. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt that he's actually going to do a decent job at adapting what he looks like. So the one thing that I'm interested in about Quicksilver is his power is kind of like the Flash from DC, where he's able to move around at supersonic speeds. People don't even really notice that he's moving around because they just can't see him. And they actually shot his sequence at 3,000 frames per second. Now, to give you guys a frame of reference, a film, like a real movie, when you see it in regular motion, is shot at 24 frames per second. When the human eye sees something, it sees it at 60 frames per second. So they were filming his sequences at 3,000 frames per second. It's going to be really interesting to see how they use that and what they're able to really do with that technology. So it was great that they were actually able to do that on set as opposed to having to manipulate it as a special effect, whereas they were able to do a lot of it in camera and then add special effects later on. That's usually the way that most people try to go, and you get George Lucas doing the prequels and saying, well, we need live actors, everything else can be CG. When it's as much that can be done practical in camera, and then adding with special effects is always preferred. So one thing that's actually kind of interesting is when Wolverine gets sent back to 1970s, I believe it's 1973, and when he meets Xavier, Xavier's a really broken character. He doesn't really know his place in the world. He's very depressed. He's very low. Wolverine, in a way, becomes a mentor to him. So the roles are kind of reversed, which is interesting, because if you rewatch the first X-Men movie, and even the second one, Xavier is a mentor to Wolverine, and now the tables have turned. So it's going to be interesting how they play that out. One thing, kind of obvious when you take into account the actress who's playing her, but Mystique's role in this movie has been said to be fairly large. She has a fairly major story arc. Now, with the size and scope of this film, that may get trimmed down. We already know that Anna Paquin was supposed to be back as Rogue, and she's in the trailer. She was in one of the 25 covers that Empire released. Empire magazine, that showcased 25 different characters, including the Sentinels, including both versions of Xavier, both versions of Magneto, pretty much all the main characters in the movie. But her story arc, as of right now, what we know, and it's partly due to the fact she's an Academy Award-winning actress now, nominated again for, I believe this is her third nomination for American Hustle. Also coming off Hunger Games, she's a bona fide star, so they definitely want to give her more screen time. So apparently she has a large story arc in the film, most likely going to be dealing with the separation from Xavier, because as if you saw X-Men First Class, they grew up together essentially. They met when they were young kids. She was an orphan, and his family kind of took her in as a sister, or as an adopted daughter and a sister to Xavier. It's going to be the separation anxiety from that, and I believe a combination of what Magneto is really attempting to do, or what his real motivations are. But again, we're not going to know a lot more until we get more footage, or we actually see the film. But Bryan Singer has actually stated that he's using the time travel aspect of this film to fix a lot of those continuity errors, such as Xavier's ability to walk. Because in the beginning of X-Men 3, when it was a younger version of Patrick Stewart and a younger version of Ian McKellen, Patrick Stewart was walking. He got out of the car. I believe he was driving the car. So he got out, was walking around, and then was in a wheelchair later. This is going to say that he does have the ability to walk. However, it's very difficult for him to do it, or it's too much of a toll on something. We're going to find out when we see the film. But one thing that's interesting, and this is one thing I didn't know until I read this report on Collider, was they're actually going to be jumping back and forth between the time frames. So they're going to be, it's not, I originally thought it was going to begin, like they were going to be footnotes. It was going to begin in the future, Wolverine was going to get sent back, everything was going to happen in the past, and then he was going to go back to his future self near the end. Now apparently it's going to be going back and forth between the future and the past. So that'll be interesting to see. And even to get the more clarity on how to develop the time travel aspect of the movie, they reached out to James Cameron. And James Cameron actually gave them a lot of insight on what to do, such as, very similar to Back in the Future, elements that happen in the past that will change the future, don't change it immediately. It takes time to do that. So it's not, if your arm was to get chopped off, you're all of a sudden not just going to have an arm. It's going to take a while for that to come about. And the one thing that's most interesting about this is they've already gone ahead and announced the next X-Men film, which is called X-Men Apocalypse. Now, anybody who knows about the Apocalypse storyline knows that it's one of the largest, if not the largest, storyline that X-Men has ever had. Days of Future Past was a close second. So when they were adapting this, X-Men Apocalypse is the next logical choice when trying to up the ante. And I don't know what to expect. We don't know hardly anything about it. We know Bryan Singer's coming back to direct it. We know Simon Kinberg is returning to write it, just like he did with X-Men or with Days of Future Past. But they've also got Mike Dougherty, and I can't remember the other guy's name, but they were Bryan Singer's writing partners on X-Men, X2, and Superman Returns. Bash Superman Returns all you want. It actually is a decent film. It's just not a decent superhero film. You got to watch it with a different lens, if you will. But we do know that X-Men Apocalypse will deal primarily with the First Class cast. One theory going around is X-Men Days of Future Past will actually end with part of the First Class cast and part of the original trilogy cast both being in the present. So the First Class cast actually being jumped forward in time with some of the original trilogy cast members, and then starting up with Apocalypse. And that has a little bit more credence to it because Fox is just announced yesterday the cast for the Fantastic Four reboot. And we know that Fox plans on doing what Marvel has done and creating a shared universe with the characters that they own. However, they only own X-Men and Fantastic Four. Now, with X-Men, obviously there's almost hundreds of different X-Men that you could choose from, but on top of that, they have X-Force, which we've heard rumblings that they may be doing a movie about. But we know that the Fantastic Four movie's coming out. We know their plan eventually is to have these franchises cross over and have maybe a shared movie where Fantastic Four and X-Men meet, possibly fight, or fight someone else, or fight each other. Either way, that'd be kind of cool. But the Fantastic Four reboot, they just announced the cast, and it was announced that Miles Teller from That Awkward Moment and 21 and Over is playing Reed Richards, or the Mr. Fantastic. Michael B. Jordan from Chronicle and from Fruitvale Station and from That Awkward Moment will be playing Johnny Storm, or the Human Torch. Kate Mara from she's in the upcoming movie Transcendence, and she's right now can be seen on the show House of Lies, will be playing Susan Storm, or the Invisible Woman. And Jamie Bell will be playing Ben Grimm, or the Thing. Now, Jamie Bell is probably one of the more known actors out of all these. He's been in a lot of movies. He was in King Kong. He was the main actor in Billy Elliot. He played Billy Elliot, the kid, a long time ago. He's been in several movies ever since. He's actually got a show coming out called, I believe it's called Turn, on AMC, which is about the Revolutionary War and kind of the first spies. So when you look at Jamie Bell, he's about 65 pounds soaking wet. And he's supposed to play the Thing, which is kind of like Fantastic Four's version of the Hulk. Clearly, they're going CG. They're not going man in a suit. But he's a real scrawny guy, and I haven't seen a lot from him that shows he's got a lot of attitude. He's got kind of the punky attitude, but that's not Ben Grimm. Ben Grimm is angry. And so it'll be interesting to see how they go about this. I really don't know. The cast was just announced yesterday. Everybody except for Jamie Bell has been rumored for months. Michael B. Jordan has pretty much been cast for several months. Every report that comes out about the movie says, and he's playing it. And the rumors are Miles Teller and Kate Mara. There were a couple other rumors for Ben Grimm. None of them were very good. When you take into account that the Fantastic Four, like Reed Richards himself, is supposed to be an accomplished scientist, which generally means he's a little bit older. This has been referred to on the internet as the Fantastic Four babies, which I like. John Campea on AMC Movie Talk actually refers to them all the time. He's not overly excited about this, but I have a feeling that it's going to do well, mainly due to the director. And it's being directed by Josh Trank, who did, in 2012, released a movie called Chronicle. And it was a found footage film. It was a found footage film based around superheroes. So that starred Michael B. Jordan as one of the superheroes, and his capability with that film, like, that completely turned the found footage genre on its head. It kind of revitalized it a little bit. It brought a different angle to what you could do with it, as opposed to just being a horror genre. But with his level of direction in that movie, and being able to make it really, really well done without established characters, I have a lot of hope for this upcoming reboot. And then once they get that film established and they do X-Men Apocalypse, hopefully after that we can see the X-Men and Fantastic Four meet up. But we're not going to know for a long time. We do know that that's in the plans. We just don't know too much more about that. But hopefully for X-Men we can get a new trailer within the next couple of weeks. It comes out in May 23rd, I believe. And this being the end of February, we're definitely going to get a trailer at some point, most likely the beginning of March, maybe even earlier. But when it comes out, I'll obviously put it on the show and we'll discuss it at that point. So, that's basically about it. This has been the next episode of Coming Soon, Movie News with Nicholson. Join me tomorrow night when I will be discussing the Avengers Age of Ultron, and also talking about Marvel Cinematic Universe and their Phase 3 lineup, which we're getting a lot more information about now. Phase 4 is still way too far away. We don't know anything about that, but I'll be talking about Phase 3 tomorrow, and everything that's happening with the Avengers, because it's just started shooting last week, so it's filming right now. And I'm getting excited about this because that means that it's actually happening. It's not a Batman versus Superman situation where 2 months before they're getting ready to shoot, oh wait, no, we're gonna push the release date back 10 months and push filming back 3 months past the 2 months that we were already at. So they really have all the papers aligned on their desk. They know what they're doing. Fox even looks like they know what they're doing now with X-Men, already announcing Apocalypse well before the release date of Days of Future Past. And Laura Schuler Donner, the producer, who's been the producer on every single X-Men film, has come out and stated that they not only are looking at Apocalypse, but they're looking at many more films ahead and doing more standalone films opposed to just, or except for just Wolverine. They're going to be doing more standalone films. So they're going to be really expanding on their shared universe and have these films coincide. So we're going to talk about more of that later tomorrow when we talk about Avengers. But until then, this has been Nicholson. You guys have been great. Enjoy your day.